Okay, it's a couple minutes after 11, so I think maybe we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a full plate on the webinar, and I want to make sure we have time to hear from everybody, including some questions and answers at the end. So welcome to Experimental Pop-Ups, Tactical Urbanism in Greater Philadelphia. We have about an hour and a half to talk on the topic here. And my name is Betsy Mastalio. I'm the Associate Director for Multimodal Planning at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. We're the metropolitan planning organization centered on Greater Philadelphia, and we cover counties in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So welcome. We're so happy that you're interested in this topic and you're able to join us today. I want to also point out Logan Axelson with DVRPC. He's a senior transportation planner in the Office of Transit, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Planning, as well as Cassidy Bolin, who is the Assistant Manager of Bicycle Programs in the same office, Transit, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Planning at DVRPC. The three of us represent sort of a core team who's working in this space here at DVRPC, and we're joined by some fantastic panelists who I will introduce in a moment. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to cover a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session, so hopefully you've okayed that. You're aware that we are recording it. And we're doing that to share this over in slides or a recording afterwards if we need to. You should all have the ability to comment within the chat box, so feel free to add your comments or any questions, particularly as we get towards the end of the presentations. We'd love to hear what questions you have, and we'll have some time for Q&A with each of the panelists. I do ask that you make sure you're muted here so we can hear everybody. And then lastly, we'd ask that if you're trying to multitask by operating a vehicle at this time, that you join us another time and enjoy the sunny day. We will have slides and a recording afterwards, which you can ask questions about then. Before we get started, I'm hoping we could learn a little bit about who all has joined us today. We had over 170 registrants, which means there's a lot of interest. So we're hoping to hear a little bit about who's joined us. So we've got two polling questions to learn a little bit more about you. Cassidy, if you're able to put the first one up, thank you. This first question is hoping to hear from each of you what organization you're representing. Sort of starts at a higher level from federal to state. And then if you scroll down, you'll see options for if you're an advocate, a citizen. We'd love to see the spectrum of who's here, and we'll give it a minute to complete that, and then we'll share it with everybody afterwards.
If by chance you are an other and you want to put that in the chat, feel free.
So we're hovering in the high 80s. Oh, just reached 90%.
We'll give it one full minute. So everyone should be seeing the results. So we have, let's see, our top two categories are advocate and MPO, which is interesting. I think that might be because we have a lot of our coworkers, but maybe we should have said.
Yeah, following that, I see sort of an equal balance between state employee, county, and consultants, which is interesting. So a pretty wide spectrum of who's joined us today. The second and last polling question is about kind of where you stand in your experience and understanding of what tactical urbanism is. So at the top, we have, can those questions be expanded? It seems to be cutting off a little bit.
I think that's your case. You can
okay.
individually move the box.
I see, to stretch it out.
Yep.
So judging, starting at the top, you've already done a tactical urbanism project and you can't wait to do more. The second is you're hoping to plan a first one or execute a first one. The third is you're not really sure about the value of tactical urbanism. And the last one is you're here to learn what tactical urbanism or pop-up projects are. And if that's you, we'll get there, I promise.
We may even show a few examples. All right, I'm gonna end it. We got a little less participation on this one. It's okay.
So, and it seems like the highest is 47% of you are hoping to plan or execute your first project in the near future. So we know that you will really learn a lot from the panelists that we have here today. So I think we can
also say, I think it's really interesting that a third of you have already done one. So, you know, we might get a chance to hear more about your experience during the Q&A.
Great. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Great. So as promised, we'll let you know a little bit more about tactical urbanism. Tactical urbanism, or pop-up programs, demonstration projects, you may have heard them called, are really low-cost and short-term projects that are there to encourage a long-term change within a community. And there's really a lot of flexibility around what that looks like, what the context, the setting is for that. And it's a way for a community to test a planning or design initiative long before you make a very expensive and maybe long duration capital investment in a project. You can test what users' behavior is out of it by getting performance measures. You can see what the community thinks about it and see if it's the right solution for the right setting prior to that commitment. Expo, or experimental pop-ups, is DVRPC's program to help provide technical assistance to communities that want to employ their own tactical urbanism or pop-up projects. And we have experience over 2+ years working with some great communities in our region. Sorry, I'll skip to the next slide. And as we do that, we've really seen some interest from both Pennsylvania and New Jersey and a number of communities for people that have approached us. We've both worked in them, we're planning them now, and they've already been executed. And what we're looking for the communities that we work with is geographic diversity within our region. We're hoping to steer towards local roads and transportation benefits that want to be tested in the community, and projects where we can really draw on past planning or design work and where there's really a community support for something to happen there. It has to be sort of a grassroots community thing that we can help support and enable these communities to put on. And of course, even though they are low cost and short term, we do expect that the communities we work with will have capacity to share their time and probably some money in order to execute these projects. So we've pulled from the projects that we've worked on over the last 2 years, and we're so grateful to have the panelists that we have on board today to tell us a little bit about some of these projects. So we're very appreciative of having them here, and they really represent the best of the community who's pushing for change to make our communities safer and more fun and livable to work in. So I've sort of shortened these bios so we can get to the good stuff of what they all have to say. We'll hear first from Kimberley Bezak, who is the founder of the Narberth Cycling Club in Narberth, Pennsylvania, and worked on the Wheels on Windsor project almost 2 years ago, maybe 1.5 years ago now. We also have Karen Tussig-Lux, who's the grants administrator and project manager for Media Borough, who is now pursuing an ongoing mural program in the borough. We have Linda McIsaac, the founder and chair of Gather in the Circle, a nonprofit in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania, who's focused on placemaking and traffic calming efforts around their historic downtown center. And last, but certainly not least, we have Cass Duffey, who's the Borough Administrator for Collingswood, New Jersey, with whom we partnered last year so that the borough was able to demonstrate some recent recommendations for their bike and ped plan. So join me in a virtual but muted round of applause to the panelists for joining us. One more thing on how we'll structure this is we're going to hear these 4 projects. We'll hear first from somebody at DVRPC who will quickly tell us a little bit about the design and some of the performance measures, and then we'll speak to our panelists to get their perspective. So thanks, and I'll turn it over to the project team. I think we'll start with Logan.
Thanks, Betsy. Great. So, you'll get a sense that I and Cassidy will be introducing some of these projects, but pretty soon we're going to be turning it over to our guests to tell you about how things actually went on the ground. But one thing Betsy alluded to that I think is really great to highlight, particularly about the first project we're going to cover today, which is Wheels on Windsor in Narberth, is how the Expo team can be sort of a catalyst to ongoing community work, ongoing projects that are like a local bike plan, other local planning efforts, where we can sort of come in and provide some design expertise that really helps both community members and municipal governments jumpstart some of the work they want to get going first on a temporary basis and hopefully moving towards permanence. So the goals of this project, which was a 2-way protected bike lane, were to provide a safer crosstown bicycle route in Narberth, a borough in Montgomery County, and to pilot innovative street treatments that had not been done yet in Narberth. So let's take a look at what that looked like. So Expo's support, as I mentioned, is primarily design support along with coordination, running a number of meetings over a little over 2 months in prep for this project. So on your left, you can see an example of some of the design support we would provide. So a sign plan, some direction to people implementing these efforts on a sort of short-term basis. But as part of the Expo team, we also want to bring project evaluation to the table. So here at DVRPC, we have a really robust traffic counting group who count vehicular, bike, and pedestrian activity. And that's one of the key tools we have to help evaluate some of these projects so that we're not just trying out an innovative technique and asking, did you like it? Didn't you like it? We're bringing lots of different data points to the table to help municipalities, to help community members understand whether or not this project succeeded, and if so, how can we get it going, and if not, what can we tweak to make something work a little better. So just to give you a sense of what actually happened, this project, as I mentioned, is a 2-way protected bike lane that took a lane of parking and replaced it with a 2-way bike lane, which we always love to see happen very quickly. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kimberly, who's going to tell you a little bit more about this project.
Thanks, Logan. I'm Kimberley Bezak. I run the Narberth Cycling Club with Jean Burrock, who is on this call today, tuning in. And we were just so thrilled for the opportunity to work with DVRPC and the Narberth Borough to make this 10-day pop-up project happen. So today, hopefully, I'll be able to give you a sense of how we got there. So this slide just really touches very generally on the timeline and the groundwork that got us from just thinking and talking about doing tactical urbanism to actually making it happen. So Narberth has always been really progressive in their thinking about walking and biking. As you see, as early as 2006, I felt like they really were trying to be pioneers in the region for just talking about using a bicycle to get around the community, not just going to a local trail and riding, like actually using it as a car replacement. So the community had been having those conversations in borough leadership, but moving from conversation and plans to action just hadn't ever gotten there. And so when I moved to Narberth back in 2015, I had come from Washington, D.C. and New York City and living in areas where I used a bicycle to get around. So it felt very natural to me. And I saw lots of opportunity in Narberth, like the little Netherlands of the main line, is how I viewed it. So at NARB Earth Day, my husband and I approached the Civic Association about, let's just try a pop-up bike lane to encourage people to bike to an Earth event and not drive. So that was just a very tiny way of getting a taste for what bike infrastructure could look like in our community. And then, as you can see, these follow-up plans that have really happened in the last 5 years all touched on the importance of bringing bicycle infrastructure into the community. In, let's see, 2017, so 5 years ago, Narberth Cycling Club was born, and we really had this vision of accommodating all ages, all levels of cyclists in the community, and encouraging them to use their bicycles for local errands. So we did about 3 years of building like human or a bike culture infrastructure, and it really did lay the pavement for some, this opportunity that with pandemic lockdown became really obvious that the time had arrived. So we jumped on it. So, oh, sorry. So the why, you know, again, just touching on these plans that we didn't want sitting on a shelf, the cycling club saw an opportunity to really advocate and rally the community around trying on some of these complete streets ideas. And for our tiny little borough with a limited budget and limited staff, we were able to reach out to DVRPC for support so that we could test some of these ideas that we had been talking about with very minimal cost, very low resource intensity on behalf of our public works department and our borough staff. And what I see as the most valuable part of this project is just letting people go out and actually experience this. You know, it's different when you're on a Zoom call and you're looking at slides. When you actually can go out there and experience it, I really think it just ties it all together. So the outside expertise that DVRPC brought to the table was really valuable for us in getting that community buy-in, and even some of our local leadership to just be willing to take the plunge and try it out. And additionally, that data analysis that DVRPC provided for us was just so valuable, because myself and Jean, as citizen advocates with only the lived experience of biking in our community, you know, we couldn't analyze that data and those survey results into Cliff Notes format. And so having that and having at the end of the project like a toolkit and a template that then allowed us as a cycling club to take the lead on bouncing into our next tactical urbanism project, which was called Wheels on Haverford. Again, all of it really was born out of this partnership with DVRPC's program. So just a quick glimpse at what Wheels on Windsor involved. It was so simple. It was temporary paint on the ground. Timing of year, we were doing it in November. So we used straw bales as barriers. There was some temporary signage, as you can see. Jean worked with DVRPC on creating some infographics that we put out in advance of the project to educate the community. We took the lead as a cycling club on getting out a press release, a social media event to kick it off, and doing flyers to the nearby neighbors and business owners. This just gives you an idea of those infographics and flyers that I was telling you about. And then there was also, as you can see, a QR code to access the survey. And here's a quick video.
Through our comprehensive planning process and our climate action plan, we've had a lot of there are suggestions to expand bike infrastructure throughout these plans, but we really need to know how the community is going to react to that, how it's going to look on the ground. We're a small borough with small streets, narrow streets, and we really need to know how it's going to impact day-to-day life. So that's why I think a pop-up trial like this is really important.
One thing to talk about it on paper, but it's another thing to see it, feel it, touch it, use it. And we really are looking for these temporary deployments to give us really good data so we can develop long-term plans.
Something that we've seen this year during the pandemic is an increased desire to move around the community on a bicycle for, social distancing, recreation, health, running errands. And it's really great to see a roadway improvement that tests giving a dedicated space to people walking, people biking, and people driving.
So just in closing, the survey results are really powerful in fueling the X project. 93.6% of people who visited the demonstration supported future improvements, and only a quarter of people who responded didn't support us doing future pop-up projects. Thanks.
Thanks, Kimberly. So now we'll be moving on to our next community and our next project to share, which is in Media Borough in Pennsylvania, Delaware County. This project stemmed from a number of previous plans, very similar to what Kimberly mentioned. And the goals were to calm traffic, increase stop sign compliance. A stop sign was added to this intersection shortly before or a couple of months before the mural itself. And the main design treatment was this mural, which Karen will talk more about. And another, as again, Kimberly shared, we were able to do some analysis of what happened once the treatment was on the ground and how that compared to the existing condition before. So for this case, the borough was interested in how the mural might affect stop sign compliance. And we were able to use video taken before the mural and after the mural to see how people were acting when they approached the stop sign. So as what we'd hoped from a treatment, we saw that the desired outcome was achieved and that there was much more complete stopping and no stop whatsoever, and fewer people doing a rolling stop. So I think, being able to share that out to the community and tell them that these goals were achieved is a really helpful and powerful way to demonstrate the value of these projects and create momentum for future projects. So now I'll turn it over to Karen to tell you some more.
Karen, you are muted.
Hi. Hi, everybody. So what you're seeing is our street mural, our first street mural, the Fort Trout of Delaware County. And it was completed in a long weekend in late September 2021 at the intersection of 3rd and Jackson, which is right next to Borough Hall. Okay, so as Cassidy said, the idea for street murals popped up in a number of plans that we've been doing over the years, most of which were funded by DVRPC's TCDI program. We were recommended decorative crosswalks. Is traffic safety features and placemaking measures. Our wayfinding plan showed them the design, a redesign for Plum Street Mall, which is a gathering place in the middle of downtown, recommended some large decorative crosswalks, as did our academic development strategy plan. So in the course of these coming up in plans, our Environmental Advisory Council talked about street murals from time to time, but and liked the idea. And I actually, during this time, visited Wildwood, which has some wonderful street murals. And I could see for myself that immediately I was slowing down and paying attention at crosswalks. But the 2020 traffic calming plan for media, which was funded by TCDI, since street murals had come up, we asked the consultants, traffic planning and design, what their take on street murals were. Was it a traffic calming feature or not? And they ended up recommending street murals, which you can see in the bottom visual here. This is their concept plan for a couple of locations. And the location on the left is where we did the mural last September. The location on the right is where we'll be doing our upcoming mural this spring. Before I go back, just notice these red things here. I'm going to talk about, these are curb extensions, which Expo has offered to help us in our spring mural. So the whole process was a collaboration between several different entities, as you can see listed here. Nothing happens without Borough Council support. And because the traffic calming plan recommended the murals, we had the buy-in from council. The Public Safety Committee for the borough, they were more, our emergency people were more skeptical. To them, street murals were not a proven measure at all. And their concerns were that that the street will be blocked and it might interfere with emergency calls. And then they wanted to make sure nobody got hurt. And actually, I don't think they even like ever blocking off the street, but they were good sports and they went along with it. Media EAC, Transition Town Media, and Media Open Streets. Those groups all shared similar goals of wanting to lower car use, encouraging walking and biking, and basically people taking back the streets. And so they're also really interested in bringing people together for a common project, to create, to really touch on people's commonalities and unity, especially during the pandemic and the tensions of the pandemic. And it turned out this event was really wonderful for doing that. Media Arts Council's whole interest in this was to bring art into the public and do a placemaking project. And the Expo group offered a lot of support by sending us information on other areas that had done street murals, paint, supply lists. And as I mentioned, they'll be assisting us with trying out the curb extensions at the spring at 3rd and Monroe, which will be painted curb extensions, which will narrow the crossing. The location this spring is right near a tot lot. So, a lot of people are walking there. But getting back to the fall mural, how did we do it? Well, we, as having done all these plans, we try to really reach out to the community and bring a lot of diverse organizations into the planning. So we tend to meet each other and find out where we have common interests. That's how I, was able to gather this group. I knew they would be really interested in it. So 6 of us met on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis as needed. Because it was the pandemic, we were meeting via Zoom, which was really convenient. And basically, we invented as we went. We didn't know how to do it, but we had a group of people with very creative people from a wide range of background and experience, and that they could draw on. Another really effective part of this was to have very tight meetings with agendas. So we were focused and to have a sense of humor about things. So it was kind of fun. It was fun. So the funding, it was entirely supported by Borough Council. They earmarked $2,500 in the 2021 general budget. Our EAC contributed $500, and so we had a total of $3,000. But we found this amount was too low, and I'll go over why later. This is a timeline for how we got things done. and it's a 6-month timeline, but it's never too early to start planning this. The really early things you need to do is get your mass gathering permit in early, and send out your call for artists. That was a little bit of a kerfluffle the first year. We only sent out the call to artists to the Media Arts Council members. And for the spring mural, we sent it out to a general population, and we got a lot of wonderful, wonderful responses. But we also got a great response. We had maybe 3 responses for last fall, and luckily one of them was this wonderful mural design. So I don't want to spend too much time because I only have 7 minutes here. So I'd be glad to answer questions about this or send these slides to anyone who would like to look at them. I can also talk about the volunteers, but there's a whole system and setup for that. We used Sign Up Genius. We thought about what jobs we needed. And then when we did it in the fall, we realized what jobs we didn't think of that needed to be done. So we'll be better prepared for the spring. And this is our budget. And I think I'm almost at the end of my time. Is that right, Betsy? So again, I'd be glad to send this out. I can answer questions during the Q&A session, but that's about it for my talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. So moving on to our next project at Stalbans Circle in Newtown Square, PA. This is another one where I think I really want to highlight Expo's work with the community. So you're going to be hearing from Linda McIsaac of Gather in the Circle community group in Newtown Square, focused on this exact location. And that's been a really fruitful partnership for us, being able to work with them to sort of expand the work that they already do and bring some of our multimodal transportation expertise to bear here. So this project was about adapting a sort of typical 50s or 60s traffic circle, which is sort of the heart of the sort of historic downtown of Newtown Square, into something more like a modern roundabout. And one of the other sort of elements of this project I want to highlight here is that we were able to rely on a lot of established guidance for how to do the design for this project. Roundabouts are what are called a proven safety countermeasure, and there is a lot of federal highway guidance on how to design these and how to make them safe for pedestrians. So this project was all about taking an area that is really prioritizes vehicle throughput and turning it into a more pedestrian-friendly place for community events, to improve local business, and overall to make the area safer for residents and visitors. So I want to turn it over to Linda McIsaac, and she can tell you a bit more about the many things Gather in the Circle does and how they worked with us on the circle itself. Go ahead, Linda.
Thanks, Logan. So I'm a founder of Gather in the Circle, and we were formed back in 2020, right before COVID hit, with the idea and intention of trying to really reimagine this historic area of Newtown Square, where, because of suburban design that's outdated.
Uh-oh. Linda's calling in from across the pond, so we might hopefully we can get her back.
Yeah, I see Linda's frozen. Let's just give her a few seconds. If not, we can maybe move on and come back to her if connection comes back.
That sounds good. And from across the pond, Cassidy means she's actually in the UK.
Correct. Okay, we'll move ahead, and when if we can get Linda back on, we will go on back to her slides.
I'm back.
Oh, Linda's
Yay.
back. Welcome back, Linda. Thank you.
I don't know why that happened. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slide. But Logan, I can't change it. So can you forward it for me?
Yeah, you should have it now.
Okay. One back. Okay. So just again, Gather in the Circles was formed out of, I was participating in the township's community strategic plan process, and then also their rezoning. And out of that, I don't have a planning background, but I became fascinated by the idea of, we really need to test some of these ideas and get the community on board on how to achieve some of the goals of the township. And I really also felt that there was an opportunity to involve the community in the process. And also having an economic background, I said, there's complete rationale logic to, testing ideas short-term basis with low-cost methods, and in order before anybody invests heavy funding down the road. So that's where Gather in the Circle came about. We work with local businesses on our committee. We work with all sorts of civic-minded nonprofits, community members, and government officials. So it's really, and so
Linda, it seems you've broken up. You could try turning your video off. That might help with some of your connection issues.
Linda, I think you're back.
did you lose me again?
We did for just a minute, but
I'm so sorry.
that's okay. I think we can go. You may want to try turning your video off. But
Okay.
we can step back though.
Can you get to my slides?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to let you handle this,
Sure.
and then I'll just say forward.
Yeah, let me know when.
So there are 2021 projects. So what we worked on, traffic calming was a part of it. DVRPC was definitely a huge part of our project focus last year. But we also held pop-up parks in some underutilized green spaces in this downtown area. We held a large community event that brought together about over 500 people to this downtown area where we wanted to activate the space and just have involved people and ask their feedback in the meantime of just creating a different sense of place in this area. And we also hosted a weekly farmers market, again, in an underutilized parking spot in this area where we wanted to just have it used in, we thought was a unique new way. So people have fresh ideas, fresh eyes, and we had the community rotate through a lot of the civic groups so that we can have outreach and connection that way as well. And coming to traffic calming, we invited, I got involved with DVRPC just by happenstance and digesting something that they had on their website. And I emailed Logan and Betsy, and they welcomed us. And we then coordinated with our local government and public works department to have this traffic calming project installed. But real quickly, the goals of our Gather in the Circle is to just make sure that we're working to sort of help further our community strategic plan. Tactical urbanism is at the heart of what we do. And we really feel that, our community working with our local government is central to having a successful long-term community at large. But moving on to the actual working with the Expo team, what they provided to us that was just, invaluable was planning expertise. Would not be able to do it otherwise. Also, the data collection and analysis that they provided, we wouldn't be able to fund that or have that ability as well. And then also the bollards were lent, which again was a cost sharing, so that it was an easier lift to get the community and our government to go ahead with this short-term project. So I think the most valuable piece to that, from personally not having a planning background, was having that planning expertise on board, so that, you know, there was that it could be done in a professional manner. So, you know, some of the successes were, you know, we actually got it done. That was a huge win. You know, we were able to get qualitative and quantitative data, survey the community, and also the reporting that, you know, Logan and his team was able to provide, put that together and report back to our local government, and hoping that's going to inform some long-term changes. Another success is that, you know, in this project, we installed 3 crosswalks in an area that was just very unsafe for crossing. People would never walk. And we wanted to increase walkability. So they are going to become permanent now. So that was just okayed. And, you know, now Logan and I are working on presenting this year's plans for further traffic calming in this area. Again, you know, we think that this is a really fruitful partnership, but I think I wanted to speak also to, you know, some of the challenges where it was definitely difficult to reach the public in a way that did not, that was fully encompassing. And because we have to work on that, what was lacking, it did cause confusion for a lot of the community. Well, you know, it's probably a minority of the community, but also, you know, the community that was confused and frustrated by the project because it's so central to our area of living. The negative feedback that we did receive was very loud and very strong. And so what that, you know, as a consequence, we don't have, you know, we have to work hard this year to sort of gain some of the trust back from the community and allow, you know, so that this year it can be a successful 2022 traffic calming project. So that's all I had to say. It was, you know, we're hoping that this year is definitely as impactful as we think our first year was, but hope to take any questions at the end of this session, and thanks for giving me the time.
Thanks, Linda. So now we'll go across the river to Collingswood, New Jersey, and talk about our project on Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue is a local road owned by the borough, and the project goals for this one was to improve pedestrian and bicycle access, and to pilot new treatments and give the community an opportunity to interact with some new things that hadn't previously existed in the borough. And we did that through curb extensions that looked a couple of different ways and included a couple of different materials. We also brought the first advisory bike lanes to the region with this project, added some new crosswalks, and used some other new temporary materials like a temporary curb ramp. And you can see here 2 of the intersections that we worked on. 2 were where 2 local roads intersected, and then the one on the left is an intersection of a local road with a county road. And the county requested that the treatments there were a little bit more conservative and kept to more of this like natural paint, not using artwork. So we adjusted the design on that one. So as I mentioned, these were the first advisory bike lanes in Collingswood and in the region. This was the most appropriate treatment and most feasible treatment based on the existing cross section. And we chose this over something like Sharrows, which would have been the main alternative because they provide dedicated bike space on either side of a center lane. That center lane is used by cars going in both directions, but they can move into the bike lanes when they need to pass one another, yielding, of course, to any bicyclists that are in the lanes. These types of treatments have been used across the US and in Canada because they increase passing distance between vehicles and bicyclists. They've been shown to slow cars, and they show bikes where to position themselves in the roadway. So we were able to see through our data gathering that these treatments were slowing vehicles and reducing speeds, both on Atlantic Avenue, but also on Collins, which is what this graph is from. That was especially important on Collins because there's a number of uncontrolled crosswalks, both existing and one that we added through this project. So slowing vehicles so that they can be more watchful and more able to react to pedestrians in the crosswalks or looking to cross was an important achievement of this project. And it's great to be able to see that those sorts of results from a project that can be quick to implement and relatively cheap to do. So now I'm going to turn it over to Cass to talk a little bit more about the project.
Hey y'all. So thank you, Cassidy, for that. And some of that data is really interesting. But and there was so much data to unpack after this. I think there's slides I'm haven't even seen yet. But for everybody to understand Collingswood's project, it goes back to our bike and ped master plan, which we did through a grant with the DVRPC. And that was really the roadmap, pun intended, to get a lot of data from a lot of folks to really look at problem areas, challenge areas, what people wanted to see. We had umpteenth meetings. I think our joke about Collingswood is we meeting everything to death. Community outreach is like what we do, man. So back in 2020, and then kind of in a bumpy way through the pandemic, we did a lot of community outreach to put together this bike and ped master plan. It's actually up. If anybody wants to take a look at that project, it's connect2020sj.com, I believe. But this created this document where we could sort of zoom out at that point and have, instead of anecdotal knowledge, real data on what needs improving, right? And then we were able to take that plan and say, okay, how do we start doing some of these things? What do people want to see? What would actually make things more helpful? And then we looked back to the DVRPC and we said, we'd love to do an Expo project. Like Cassidy said, this was along Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue is along the speed line, the Paco in Collingswood. It's also the home to our farmers market. There's a ton of activity there. You'll see Haddon Avenue. That's our main corridor. We weren't quite ready to take that bite out. And that's also a county road. So we deferred to this sort of secondary road. The intersection with West Collings was also particularly interesting. I don't know how much you guys could tell from that picture, but it's a funky kind of tri-intersection. When you're making that right on, one of my favorite quotes from the thing was, somebody's feedback was, people take that turn like a freeway off-ramp. Like people just come boom, flying off of there. And a lot of the treatments we did around there were those bollards. That's not the word. Those orange ones are called delineators. See, I learned so much from you guys. I will get to the success of this project, the hits and misses, but the changes we made at West Collings Avenue were remarkably impactful. And we also we have some key partners there. Cassie was a big part of this project. Betsy was a big part of this project. We partnered, much like the other folks who had an art portion to their project. Perkins Center for the Arts has a home in Collingswood, and they did our artwork. So a lot of hands. A lot like everybody else's goals, the same things we all want, right? We wanted safer biking and pedestrian access and corridors. This was, these modifications are cheap. They're not permanent. That makes it, we were just joking before we got on that was really huge when you're explaining these projects to, whether it be your governing body, whether it be your residents, your department heads. I'd always say to people, like, we're not marrying this. It's a few $1,000s. We can see if we like it. We're going to test run these things. And everybody has an opportunity to give feedback, even the people that didn't like it, to which we would say, like, yes, we understand. Like, they would call my office and say, like, I don't really like these armadillos. I don't really like this bump out. We'd say, great, fill out the survey, because that kind of data is really important too. Like, we want to hear from everybody. And you may or may not be surprised that there were varying opinions on this kind of project. There were some people that really were very eager to tell us that they were not a fan of parts of it, and a lot of people that told us they liked it. They liked it too. So very similar goals to everyone else. As Cassidy mentioned, we tested advisory bike lanes. If you don't know what an advisory bike lane is, don't feel bad, because I think up until like the last month of our planning, I was still trying to get my head around it. It was a very new concept. It was a difficult, I think that was one of our biggest challenges, was explaining to people how that worked specifically. The markings are different than some other ones. So that was a big communication challenge, this specific type of treatment. We got mixed results. I won't say it's the most popular part of the project, but again, what we were able to tell people was that was kind of the point. Like, we were testing this out. The bump outs were painted artistic. You'll see some peaks at them. And then the intersection with the county road had the delineators. And I will say, I'll get into like the success of some of these in a moment. Again, community engagement is something we do with a heavy hand. So we have multiple channels of communication. We had a ton of buy-in from folks. We had some community stakeholders that were really interested in this. We had town meetings, we had print publications, signage, kickoff event. We made sure that we did direct outreach to residents on Atlantic Avenue. Like, they got a hand-delivered letter with a person's name and number that said, hey, this is going to be on your street. If you have questions, please let us know. Here's how it may affect your parking. We had a doctor's office, for example, that was impacted because he had older patients that may have trouble navigating what would be a new curb for them. So we spent a lot of time talking to different groups of people, the community at large, business members, specific residents. That was a big part of our project. Here's some numbers. Most of the people who responded were Collingswood residents. Pretty good survey response. We pushed the survey quite a bit, both broadly, reminding people to take surveys, and when people said, one-on-one, hey, I don't like this, or they would email us, we'd say, got it, noted, you might want to put this in the survey. So all that data is useful in a bunch of different ways. Here, if you want to like walk away with something, some of these treatments were confusing and new, and that can be scary for people, but overwhelmingly, people thought the project made the road safer. So, and that's really the goal, right? So even though we got a lot of kind of static about confusion, and when you talk about like the noise being distracting, there were people who were like, this is dumb, this is unsafe. The data bared out that a lot of people thought it was safer. So you kind of have to balance that against the loudest folks. So it was a good overall project. Again, here's elements that people specifically thought they would like to be made permanent. We are actively moving toward making a part of this treatment permanent. These are kind of like the open-ended bits. The advisor bike lanes were confusing. We had armadillos on the road. We ended up removing them mid-project because in the dark, we were scared that people were they kind of were on the edges of our painted bump outs, and people were biking through them and there was a fear that people would hit them. So even in the middle of the project, we were tweaking and making adjustments and hearing from people. So, you know, there's kind of a mix of stuff there. What I think is really an important takeaway here is, for me, we went from a DVRPC funded master plan that looked at bike and ped improvements. We did a demo project very successfully. And then now we are moving toward chasing funding to make the bump outs at Collins Avenue a permanent addition. Those bump outs at Collins Avenue were like universally across the board. Nobody thought that was a bad idea. So, you know, in Collingswood's case, when I talk to folks about this, this is a case study of success in moving from planning to demo to a permanent installation that everybody agreed. You know, we probably will not make the advisory bike lanes permanent, right? So there can be parts of this that you let fall off the map, but the goal is to get to permanent installation. And the other thing is, when you are able to back up a grant application with study and demo data, you are so much more likely to get funding for those projects. So all of these steps lead to, and I'm talking as a borough administrator here, lead to money in the bank, like lead to getting funding for that project. And that's really, like, at the end of the day, what you're going for. The other thing I do want to mention, and everybody else said this, but I want to echo folks' comments on partnering with the DVRPC, sorry guys, was really critical to adding legitimacy to this project. Everything from data to turning radiuses to making sure that emergency vehicles could get through certain areas. I mean, we were examining whether or not delivery trucks, right, could make turns, because that was important. If you were going to cut off somebody's Amazon truck, they were going to be salty with you, right? So instead of us just sort of dreaming up painted curb cuts and stuff, we were able to say, no, this is backed by planning and data, and you might not like it, but there's a real engineering value to this. So having partnering with the DVRPC was very, very critical and really led a lot of credibility to the project. I will say, the last thing I'll say is we are actually just last weekend launched our second demo project. It's in a different area of town, but there was a lot more enthusiasm and a lot less confusion with folks. They were like, oh, this isn't so scary. We get it. We can hate it. We can love it. We can test it out. It's been a really great way to sort of dip your toe in the water for these projects. And I think there's a building enthusiasm about them. And that's all I got, folks.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for your input here. Cass, Kimberly, Linda, Karen. It's so great to hear your individual perspectives, but to hear them all together. So we hope that this provided sort of an overview of the general context of some of this work and what all it could mean and how it's impacted these communities. We purposefully left a half an hour to touch on some Q&A, and we hope to hear from you. And we'll transition to that now. I'd like to start that transition by building off of some of the questions that we saw in the chat. And I would encourage you to add some more questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them or follow up with you afterwards. But I did see a couple of questions about what types of roads we have seen these projects done on in the region, whether they're local, county, or state roads, and then some questions about design and how we do those designs. So Logan, I'll ask the first question to you, which is if you could talk a little bit about what types of roads we've worked on and where we've seen projects in the region, and then how you do the design of these projects while building off of much of the engineering standards and guidance that's out there for these types of improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Betsy. And that is one of the key road ownership and going along with that standards are really some of the key factors in how we select projects that we're able to help with, and exactly what types of treatments we're able to do. So while the Expo program is all about helping communities bring innovative, safety and multimodal transportation projects to their communities, we want to make sure that we are in line with established guidance. And one of the good ways we can do that is by focusing mainly on local roads, rather than, for instance, state-owned roads, or in other cases, county roads, simply for the reason that we have a direct line to a municipal engineer usually, who can sign off on concept plans that we create, who often is the sort of point person for working with public works for us. So not only does it make our process faster, it gives us the opportunity to work with someone else who's willing to share their expertise, their engineering expertise, and back up some of our research, which we might be doing through, say, established design handbooks, and other guidance that is, goes beyond just sort of our own creativity. So we are able to draw on existing guidance, but apply it in a way that feels novel, and that brings, new safety benefits that that communities often haven't been able to get going by themselves. So that sort of, it really reinforces that partnership that that I think you've seen in all of our project work so far, where working both with the community and hand in hand with local government is a really effective way for us to make sure that we're putting the safest designs out there, that we're doing something that has buy-in from the established stakeholders, especially including roadway owners. So in the future, as we go forward looking for new projects, we're focused on local roads so that we have the opportunity to do some of these innovative treatments and really get them done quickly without having to go through a long permitting process, which by nature a state government has to do. So, that sort of informs where we're going and what we've done so far.
Thanks, Logan. So touching a little bit on one of the points you made, and something that I know we had some interest in from registrants. If any of you of the municipal contact people want to talk about how you do get key stakeholders on board, just any experience you could give and what you found successful in getting those people on board.
I mean, I can say we were able to identify a lot of those groups through our master planning. We had spent so much time doing that we knew locally the folks that were real geared up about these kinds of projects, because they're very vocal. And we were able to touch them to be ambassadors for the project. So that really, for us, and I know not everybody has a bike and ped plan, but you can use different, you don't have to wait until your project to start identifying those groups. For us, that gave us a channel to do that early, and then we were able to build on that.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in my talk, in the planning we've done in the last 2 years, we've tried to really reach out and get all kinds of groups involved in the planning efforts. And, we talk to people and we just see what our common interests are. And, and if I see somebody who can help somebody else, I try to connect them. And so that's kind of how it worked out. You just have to talk to a lot of people and be aware of what's going on in your community.
And maybe for Kimberly and Linda, do you want to, you're sitting in a slightly different spot. How did you convince municipal staff and also the elected officials to buy into this?
Yeah, I guess it is a unique perspective to view it through the lens of being like a citizen advocate. So, as I touched on earlier with creating the cycling club, we had that long-term vision of building that community and getting that buy-in from day one. So showing up to meetings and voicing what the bicycling and walking community was really looking for, and just with the experience of seeing like those desire lines out on the roadway, you know, we host a lot of rides. We do really wacky rides. We bike to ice cream, we bike to yoga, we do Halloween costume rides. So we pull in a ton of people, and we're always hearing feedback about like, I would love to just be able to bike the wrong way on this one block that's a one way, and I just want to get downtown, or I just want to get to my kid's school. So just being an information source for between the community and the borough was a really helpful part of the process. And then with pandemic, you know, just reaching out, as Cass mentioned and Karen mentioned, reaching out to those different stakeholders and building those relationships just like at the ground level was so helpful. You know, the fire truck, of course, was very concerned about, can the fire truck get through? And DVRPC having that expertise and coming in from the outside was just really instrumental in kind of calming those fears, you know, connecting with SEPTA, because Windsor was part of the part of the bus route. The local preschool is right there on the corridor. So just having those early conversations and kind of getting that ground floor buy-in was really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Kimberly said. Getting the buy-in is a long process, and you know, old-fashioned canvas, door-to-door, phone call, explain, tell your story, connect with all the other groups and township officials who have, and sort of explain how there's overlapping goals. So to me, one of the key strategies was finding where we can, where we have shared goals and how it would work together, how we can work together. And it's just a constant conversation. I mean, it's never going to end, but I just think it takes a lot of work, but it can be done. It's just picking up the phone, face-to-face, explaining, and really selling the story of where this can be good for everybody.
Great question, great answers, everybody. So this is sort of another one for the whole group. And I think we just got a chat from Kevin Myers sort of asking about, you know, sort of how do you consider the end of some of these projects? But I wanted to ask more generally, you know, why did you choose a temporary project as opposed to a permanent project? What did you think the value of having a temporary project was? And if you have thoughts about what the next steps were, did you know that at the beginning, or did you sort of figuring it out along the way? So whoever wants to go first, jump on in.
Well, and as I mentioned, we had skepticism from our emergency departments, fire and police, and you know that this was something that was going to work. So to get any, you know, to get buy-in, you know, we could say, well, this will be temporary. And in fact, you know, we didn't worry too much about the paint we used, because we thought, oh, well, this is going to be a pilot street mural, and you know, it'll just last a year. And as soon as it got painted, we were all like, oh, this is beautiful. We can never let this disappear. So we scrambled to find a sealant that might make it more permanent. But in fact, it is kind of wearing out. And so we've decided that one of our events this year will be to touch up the mural from last year with longer lasting paint.
I'll just say temporary projects are, well, I'm sorry, Kimberly. Temporary projects are just much less scary, much less costly. They give you a little bridge, right? And they let you dip your toe in the water. And like I said, I mean, we found things that worked, and we found things that we were not so great. You know, we were not a big fan of. And we are big community outreach people, and it gave people an opportunity to tell us what they liked and didn't like. Look, big infrastructure projects cost a lot of money. It's very helpful to hear from people, oh man, this is the Collings Ave bump out again, the one that everybody was in favor of. That's a major walking path to our middle and high school. And, you know, it just made that immeasurably safer for kids walking across there. So, I mean, really, it's like leasing. It's like leasing your car. You know what I mean? You can buy it after a few years, but it just gives you an option to say, well, I didn't love any of this, or I really loved it. It gives you options.
Well, in Narberth too, it's really just that pencil to pavement, such a short, compressed time frame. I mean, from the very first conversation and reaching out to DVRPC to getting that pilot launched, it was 2 months. And you cannot get a permanent project on the ground that fast. And not only that, for $1,500, the borough was able to do this by partnering with NCC as a volunteer group and DVRPC's program. It allowed the borough to do something that it had never been able to achieve. We had all these plans sitting on the shelf talking about how important it was to be more bikeable. And the borough, you know, as far as setting priorities, it couldn't dedicate the amount of money that would be involved in like a traditional way of approaching things. So this tactical urbanism kind of like quick and dirty way of doing it, and then 10 days of refining and making tweaks. And at the end of it, we had what looked like a really permanent design that the borough could then spring forward into new projects. One thing to mention is we did a follow-up just earlier this year in the spring, late fall, winter, and it just ended. We did another pilot on another main street in Narberth it was called Wheels on Haverford. And it really took that template of WOW and applied it to a different section that people identified wanting to see improvements on. And those two projects together were so successful that now the borough is thinking about these permanent projects and putting money behind them. And also Narberth doesn't have a bike plan. You know, we have a lot of plans, but we don't have a bike plan. These projects have laid the groundwork to then have the data to put together a request to apply for a grant and get a bike plan. So it's kind of like a backwards way, I guess, of doing it, but a really, for a small borough, it ended up being the recipe that worked, so.
And can I just add, I think why short-term or tactical urbanism projects are so important is because as, like from the point of view of a citizen advocate, to me, I think it's just fair. It's fair to a lot of what was, for instance, getting pedestrian crosswalks and slower traffic in this area of our township was going to take years. And there's a lot of, it's a process, and people just want to cross the street safely. So, you know, luckily we're able to get, you know, our township on board and the expertise of DVRPC to say, look, let's just test it out, you know, lower cost, let's just see. And so there wasn't that delay in just allowing people to walk across safely. So to me, I just think it makes economic sense, but it's just fair to get it done for the community without all the delays, but then also involving the community in the process. So I think that's key.
Thanks for those answers. I'm going to answer a few and then lead that into opening up to you all for some round robin questions. So we had a few about materials and funding, one about funding from DVRPC for these projects. I think we've contributed, at least from the ones I know more intimately, we contributed something in terms of either materials or money. We don't really, it's always been a little bit on an as needed basis, but we try to be a little bit flexible in that. But it, you know, it's a small amount, let's say under $1,000. And then our greatest contribution is our technical assistance, the travel monitoring, those sorts of things. And then following from that, a question about if any materials are available as part of the program. I think Linda mentioned early on that we purchased the materials that then Newtown Township borrowed. I think we'll be continuing to explore having a lending library. I think we have found in some cases, which connects to another project, that things are still on the ground or might be on the ground longer than we anticipated. You know, certainly a lot of stuff is still up in Collingswood. A project we're planning right now in Camden from the beginning. It's planned to be up as long as possible. So, you know, a lending library is something we're interested in. And for some of these ones that do have a very specific time frame from the outset, like some of the ones in Narberth, where, you know, it was going to be 2.5 weeks. That was the plan from the beginning. That might be a workable model. So ongoing process there. If you are in a region, you know, TBD. If you're not, and you're just looking for other templates, NJTPA, North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, something like that. They have a lending library, and I think Keith is on the call. If anyone, if he wants to weigh in, or, you know, if there's a website for that or anything. So I think other places, other MPOs and things like that have been exploring this idea of a lending library to make these projects easier and more achievable, especially for more under-resourced communities. So all of that leads into, we could do a round robin for you all to talk about the costs for your projects. And then if you also want to say, because I know this came up earlier, whether or not they were on local roads or county roads or state roads, I think that would be helpful too.
So as far as cost, you know, for our first mural, we budgeted $3,000. And the reason, and I mentioned it wasn't enough, the reason it wasn't enough is that the artist ended up doing a lot more work than just the design. And we paid the artist $1,000, and we realized we needed to pay the artist $2,000. So our budget for this year is $4,000. And we've only done the murals on local roads so far. But otherwise, all the support from Expo was great, and we came in on budget on all the other things. And can I just say one other thing? We had a music group during the whole day, and that was essential to this project, because it just made, you know, when it started getting a little warm and we started getting tired, we had this beautiful music in the background, very kid friendly. We had chalk activities for the little kids that were too young to do the painting. So that was all good.
It's interesting you say that, Karen, because I think our budget was $7,500. Art was a huge part of it. If you are doing an art component and you have an artist coming on board, it's going to be more than $100. Like, artists want to get paid for their time and creativity, and they should be paid for their time and creativity. So that was a big part of our budget. And ours was a split between a local and it intersected with a county road. So a portion of our treatment, a very large portion of our treatment, was on a county road. So that required some coordination on our part.
And having the Arts Council on board as part of the planning, they were going to make sure the artists got paid adequately. So,
as I mentioned, our project was $1,500. Again, lots of support from the cycling club for graphic design, you know, pro bono support, and just being taking the lead on engaging the community. We put together a social media event and promoted that really widely. And to Karen's point, we had like an actual kickoff event to open the 10-day pilot, which was really well received. Lots of folks came out from all over the region. We had a group bike in from Haverford to check it out. It also provoked like a lot of envy, like, how do we get this in our community? This is amazing. So I think that the kickoff event is really essential just to plan and start thinking about. And it was a local road. The borough streets were all local. So we did get a sign off from the mayor. We got sign off from the police chief and sign off from borough council to make it happen.
And for our project, because it was a part of a lot of the projects that we were working on, Logan, you may know the cost for the bollards, but you know, the paint was already going to be supplied by our public works, and they were going to use it anyhow. We Gathering the Circle, you know, had to supply planters and some plants material with that. We're going to reuse the planters, and I think the planters were like $1,500 that we're going to use at all our events and subsequent traffic calming. So that's going to be spread out over time. Do you remember the cost, Logan, from your end?
Yeah, it was slightly over $2,000 for the, bollards, speed bumps, the actual like vertical elements of the materials. And, you bringing up the planters and being something we can reuse is a great point too, where, we're always looking to use materials that either a town, a borough or a township already has on hand, and made, maybe looking for a use for, or something that can be deployed in some other project in the future too. That's one of the other ways we're trying to both save costs and be, efficient and good stewards of the materials that we end up working with. So, absolutely.
Yeah, the lending library was really helpful in keeping our project costs down. We borrowed the stencils, and with that in mind, a lot of the materials from Wheels on Windsor, we were able to reuse the signs and even some bollards and stuff for Wheels on Haverford. So that kept that follow-up project cost like really manageable.
Thanks, everybody. Keith, I see your hand is up if you're still there.
Hi.
Hi, there he is.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I heard Cassidy mention the NJTPA's lending library, and that's come up a couple times now. So I'll just address that. The NJTPA is kind of rolling out, it's a soft rollout of this lending library program. And for the time being, it's sort of just limited to NJTPA programming, but that doesn't mean that it's limited to NJTPA region. As evidence of that, we actually have the first project in Collingswood, where Cross County Connections was able to use the lending library resources, and that's up right now still. And the reason for that is the NJTPA administers some of the funding for transportation management associations, and they're great organizations, great resource for municipalities to kind of connect with and make that transition to getting support for tactical urbanism demonstration projects. The other thing I just wanted to mention very quickly is that I heard that, and I understand the rationale for wanting to stick to local projects. The NJTPA did work with a county though for a demonstration project on a county roadway on a county facility, and I would just recommend that you don't shy away from that, because one of the things that we hear when we're trying to talk to the state or the county, the engineers point to a lack of examples in our state, and this is how you start building examples, by tackling it head on. So there is an opportunity to connect and coordinate with counties and municipalities.
Thanks so much for jumping on, Keith. And thanks for your support in Collingswood and within your region. We have about 5 minutes left, and I saw a question in the chat that I'm also curious about, and it's the reason that all of you were invited to weigh in on this. So I'd like to do a rapid fire question in the last 5 minutes and just call on each of you to kind of answer this question. And the question would be, what advice do you give somebody who wants to get started on a project like this in their own community, whether they're a community member, an advocate, or they work for the municipality? What's your best piece of take it home advice? And I'll call on the first person, and then maybe you can hand the baton to the next person. Cass, do you want to kick off that rapid fire closeout?
Well, I've said a couple times that, Collingswood is all about community outreach. There's a Kimberley and a Linda in Collingswood too. Those folks were emailing me, emailing our governing body. They were coming to meetings. They were talking about the importance of these changes. And that does change the mind of folks that can be resistant to these kinds of projects. So if you are on the administrative side of things, be in touch with folks that have interests in these things. And if you're an advocate, start respectful dialogue with folks. Squeaky wheels do get grease, right? So it's important to hear from groups and advocates about what they'd like to see, because then you lean into those changes a little bit more. So, and if you start a project, use every communication channel you have, because the more people that are not surprised by sudden markings on the roadway, the better your project is going to be from day one. I gotta hand it off. Kimberly, you're up.
Just takeaway advice, try things on for size. That's really that was the turning moment in Narberth that started moving us in the direction of action. Giving the community a chance to actually go out there and see what these things look like just made all the difference in calming those fears, like Cass was talking about. And it just, again, it was a turning point for us. So just being willing to kind of take that little leap and trying it is my advice.
I'm going to hand it off for you, Kimberly.
Oh, sorry.
Linda, you want to go next?
Well, in addition to what Cassandra and Kimberly have said, I think from my experience, and I think in much in life, don't let the negative, loud voices stop you from moving forward. And because it's not a full reflection of the community and what the community thinks, they may be the loudest, they may be sometimes have bully behavior to prevent forward motion. And I just think, you have to, if you believe and you have a community that believes that this is worth doing and trying. And sometimes I think that negativity is out of fear of change, and just being understanding of where it's come from as well. And so having that sensitivity that it's not outright anger at you, it's because of the fear of the unknown. And so helping to educate and share with those people who may have negative feelings, that you're going to listen to them, but that this is why this could be good.
Karen?
So I would say at the beginning, bring together your allies that have a real interest in what it is we're doing. Start everything earlier than you think you should, and have tight, friendly meetings with agendas that can bring out the best thinking of all the group members. And really good communication to the public. That's another, I didn't even touch on that, but we have a wonderful communication system going. So, and the person we work with is great, and she's right on top of things. So, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Karen. Logan, how about you?
Well, I first just want to co-sign on everything that our guests have said today, because they're absolutely right, especially about outreach and communication and knowing what to listen to and how closely. But I would say from our side, one of the best things that we can find when we're looking for a project is something that's part of an ongoing process. So that may be part of a community process or an ongoing community activity. But if when we're looking at a sort of a local transportation plan, and there's something that says, we want something more bike or ped friendly here in this location, but we don't know exactly what it is, that's a perfect example of an Expo project, something where we can really do some testing and get solid results going forward. So jumping on and using an existing plan or process or other materials as a launch pad, that's really what I think is helpful in getting these projects off the ground. Cassidy, what do you think?
Oh gosh, we prepped for this before and I've gone blank. I think defining the goals at the beginning are really important. I think we've tried to do that for all of the projects, because ultimately, when you do have that pushback, you know, referring to what you were trying to achieve, and then hopefully having data showing that in fact you did achieve that, I think can be really important. I think it's also really important for messaging, and also even just to clarify the design. You know, if you know what you are trying to achieve, if there's some issue, all that kind of stuff can help, you know, really focus the design and also focus the communication around that design, and always be something you can be referring back to about why choices were made in terms of materials or, you know, design elements or things like that. So I think that is really important to having a successful project.
Well, thank you all for your input on this. We are just now past the 12:30 mark, so I think it's time to wrap up this webinar, but certainly not the conversation. To everybody, Logan, Cass, Kimberly, Karen, Linda, and Cassidy, thank you all for your persistence in wanting to see better in our communities. Thanks for trusting DVRPC. And thank you for your time today and sharing your story with others in the region. For those of you who are listening in, the registrants and attendees here, thanks so much for listening, for your interest, for the questions that you included in the chat. They're all things that we're thinking of or we're actively working on. If we didn't get to it, please feel free to email Logan, Cassidy, or me. We have a DVRPC Expo webpage. You can find out more information there. And also, please, if you have a project that you're thinking of, even if you just want to talk to somebody for a minute and bounce some ideas off of, let us know what you're thinking or ways that you think the Expo program can support more people in the region. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And I think that's it. We will be sending out a follow-up survey on the webinar. So let's keep the conversation going. And thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your lunch hour.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You.